when it comes to a 90-day plan, what are steps 1, 2, and 3? In your mind, then maybe we'll debate or maybe we agree. Who knows?
So my point of view is that, and I think it's a big differentiator if you're in a leadership position versus if you are an individual contributor. Not dramatically, but I think when you're in a leadership position, the most critical thing that you can do is create relationships that are cross-functional. So if you are a new CMO and not creating a really tight relationship with your CFO, whoever's leading sales, assuming it's not you, your CEO, those relationships, you never get time to create them if you don't do it in your first 90 days. Because and first of all, you're new. So like it increases the awkwardness of trying to create those relationships dramatically if you wait past 90 days. So that's my number one thing. Figure out who you need to align yourself with in the organization and not just align strategically and do all of your boring business shit, but really focus on who that person is, get to know them, learn their kids' names, learn what they like, learn what struggles they have in the business. But you only get to the really good stuff once you create what is an actual relationship with the people that you're going to be working with. So that's my number one thing is like, do that.
I kind of call that the, like almost getting the lay of the land in the business. So understanding who's responsible for what and also like a baseline of what's actually going on.
Yeah.
Is it the same or the relationships and then the baseline?
I
like,
do the
where
relationships.
Are we today?
Yeah, the relationships and then the baseline. Because I think that when you're brand new, depending on your company culture, you might not get the real story unless you create the relationships in order to build the trust that people can be really honest with you about struggles that they don't. And you have to keep in mind, too, that all of these people, when you're coming in at that level of leadership, you're a little bit of a threat. And it's a little scary. So I think you're sort of a fool if you don't recognize that there's this immediate probable tension that exists, and a propensity to not be as honest as they can be. So I lead with relationships and then for sure figure that piece out. Secondly, I think the other big thing that always helps in some of that getting the lay of the land is my second thing, which is you have to talk to customers.
I'm with you on that one. I actually missed
right away.
I missed the relationships and I missed the baseline because in my post I went straight to go figure out everything about your customers. And when I say customers, I mean both paying customers and potential future customers. Because you're going to get different stories. Like if you just go and talk to the people that love you, you're going to get one story. If you go and talk to all the people that use your competitive product or use whatever the status quo is, you're going to get a very different story. Yeah. So covering both those I think is really important.
Yeah, I love that. Because I think one of the things that then you can do is you can use those customer stories to increase that level of trust with the people that matter, right? If you go talk to a customer and they had a really poor billing experience, you can go to your CFO that you now have some level of relationship with and say, hey, I was out at a customer visit and this is some of the feedback that I got. How can we solution for this together? I'd really like to help because it sounds like it's just a product naming thing that's confusing them. How can we work on this together? And I think that that's a really effective way to kind of like almost become not the bad guy that comes with all the problems, but you're just the voice of the customer, which is, I think, what any marketing leader really fundamentally should be anyways. And so that's sort of, I think there's lots of things after that, but like if you just do those two things, I think you immediately become far more successful than if you come in and you just immediately start to do some of the things that are detractors we're suggesting, which is this idea of starting with demand generation. You know, you need quick wins. Show that you can generate demand. Yeah, got to get the leads.
Got to get that landing page up and get those ads running.
Yeah. No. Not if you're a real leader. I don't think
so. If you're a real leader and you're in an established company, there should be a team doing that, right? And you should be able to continue to do those activities while the marketing leader understands customers, understands if you need to change your messaging, your positioning, understands if the sales team has the right tools to enable them to sell, all those different pieces, understand if your data's right.
Yeah.
And so you can't, I've always found, and it depends how you're also quantifying demand, right? So, or how you define demand, right? So there's demand generation of outbound demand. There's running, like, I would call them like kind of traditional demand gen, running webinars, going to events, doing these things where you basically get contacts, MQLs, whatever you want to call them, and then give them to your sales team, and then all those people don't buy something. There's that option. And then there's other things like running performance marketing campaigns, like AdWords or bottom of the funnel social. And that stuff, again, doesn't work if you don't have the right sales engine, if you don't have the right messaging. And the last piece is content marketing, in my view. I think content marketing is the most effective, but you can't do content marketing well if you haven't done those pieces up front.
Totally.
Understand the customers, get buy-in from the leadership team through the relationships. Yeah.
I also think, so my big focus on the internal relationship building is also a byproduct of understanding how budgets work, and the idea that in order to keep doing anything that works, you are going to need to create a lot of goodwill in the organization and a lot of clear communication. So I think a huge miss that a lot of marketers have across the board, whether you're an individual contributor or in a leadership role, is internal marketing and really sharing with the organization all of the great things you're doing. I think that a lot of the reason that the CMO position has the level of turnover that it has in the industry in general, especially in tech, is because people aren't marketing what they're doing internally and showing that some of these things, because what you're talking about with content, I totally agree. It's super effective. It's a long-term strategy. That shit does not just, you don't go to an event, get 200 leads, and I think it can be short, but like generally, if you're doing it right, it needs to be super consistent and long-term.
The way people think about content marketing, and I commented on this on LinkedIn today, I think is wrong. I think people think about content marketing in the view of only SEO. And if you think about content marketing in a way where it's more of broad communication,
yeah,
and then I think you can get the results quickly. And I know that because I do it at a lot of different companies.
Sure.
Build a case study, run ads on it to your entire target market, let them consume it, wait for the inbounds to come in faster than they were coming before.
Sure.
And so
yeah, that's fair.
I think some people, the reason that I call it a long-term strategy is because you have to think long-term. If you're thinking short-term, then your case study is going to be, come buy my thing, 20% off.
Right.
So you have to think about it long-term. Like, I'm trying to educate people about what the product did at this account, or I'm trying to educate people on this topic or this. And through the awareness created from the content, if you deliver it in an effective way, will create more awareness and therefore inbounds. And so
yeah, I like this.
I like to push back on that piece, because yes, if you're posting 6 blogs a week targeted at keywords, you're not going to get short-term results.
Yeah, totally.
I think you touched on one thing that I want to cover, which is CMO turnover. Haven't really talked about this one much.
Okay.
So it should be fun.
All right.
I
talk about this all the time.
What do you think, like, what are the reasons that it's happening? Do you think it's getting worse? What's happening here?
So Jason Lemkin, who, if you're not familiar with him, he's a many times founder, and he has SaaSter as the event and the podcast and the whole thing, right? And he has I don't know if it's a blog, I think it's a blog that I quote a lot, which his statement in whatever this thing is that I can't remember, a blog-ish thing, is that the CMO's main job is to do the CEO's bidding. Like,
to execute the CEO's vision only better, is what I think I saw recently.
Yeah. So when I say quote, I use that loosely as a term. But essentially, like, his point, and I think that, like, I sort of said do the CEO's bidding, but I do think that, like, in general, the CMO and the CEO need to be on the same page about what you are trying to achieve. And I think that some of this chatter about how CMOs or marketing departments in general aren't revenue focused enough, and that's why they're getting fired, like, I don't actually think that that's very accurate. I think that through the research that we've done about sales and marketing alignment, it was really eye-opening that salespeople get what marketers do, CEOs get what marketers do. They just aren't doing it very well, and they aren't communicating internally that they are doing it. So there are things that are always going to be impossible to measure and are insanely important. So one of the things that people that are great at alignment do is that they care about brand. And so everyone's like, how do you measure brand? And I think that there are leading indicators and lagging indicators, and the intuition that is inherent in great marketers cannot be undermined, I don't believe. Meaning that, like, if you look at a platform like Drift, right? You think about chatbots as a thing in the world.
But they are crushing. If
Drift isn't the first or one of the top 3 brands that you list, I would be shocked.
Yeah.
Why? Because they have a sick brand. Now, can you measure it based on the number of likes on David Cancel's LinkedIn posts? Not really. Can you do it with Dave Gerhardt? Like, you can't do it really with like a metric, but you know the brand sentiment of that category is Drift's crushing it. And it's things like that everyone either sees, or it's the main leader in marketing's job to make sure that that organization understands what the strategic direction is that they're driving towards, what tactics they're doing to make that shit happen, and ultimately if they're successful or not. But painting that picture, telling that story.
It takes years to get there.
Sure.
And I think that even leaders that could have gotten there don't get the opportunity to get there if that's the only path that they take.
Yeah, I mean,
right? So like,
I think you need that, like, internal selling cannot be like, I can't talk about it probably any more than I have already, but like, really that's what it boils down to me is like, if you're getting fired because people in your company don't understand what you're doing, like,
your fault.
That's your fault. Like, that is squarely only on you. And if you are working for a CEO who doesn't get marketing and the value that they provide, you shouldn't have taken that job.
You're in the wrong company.
Yeah, like, that's all there is to it. Like, you can fight that battle and get upset when you get fired, or you can choose to try to change it, and if it doesn't work,
leave.
Yeah.
I put the buckets into, I don't know how many, so I'm just going to go through. I think it's 3. So there's one bucket of CMOs that are just operating like it's 2004.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So their strategy is just not good. They deserve to be fired. There is a bucket of people right now that fit into that bucket and should be fired. There's another bucket of people that are doing some of the right things but can't measure their results.
Okay.
Can't quantify the impact that they're having, but might actually be having an impact. I think those people put themselves at risk by not being able to quantify the impact. And then I think there's a third camp of people that are doing it really well, that have a modern strategy, can measure their results, have buy-in from the rest of the organization. I think that's actually the minority of those 3 buckets.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there is a fourth, but I think that's pretty.
And then it kind of comes down to, especially, I mean, I work mainly with companies less than 50 million in revenue. So for those types of companies, it's who is in charge of the strategy, because right now it seems like it's a shared responsibility among several different leaders. We were talking about this in the car. In the companies where I've seen it work really well, you have a amazing strategist as a CMO that puts the pieces in place for the execution, that sets traditional marketing things, product place, price, promotion, how are we going to distribute, and then sales executes on that strategy. But in a lot of companies, especially tech companies, sales now is setting the go-to-market strategy, the price, the distribution model, sometimes the targets and segmentation. And so it makes it really difficult. At least it would make it difficult for me as a marketer to do my job really well if I didn't have oversight of those core components, because it's the mix of those 4 things that create a strategy that you can execute, positioning in the market. No?
Yeah. No, I like this.
Yeah.
I think the question that I'm rolling around in my brain is I do wonder sometimes how much of those fundamentals that you learn in your marketing degree people really focus on and think about. Like the number of marketers that I've had a pricing conversation with could fit in my little hand.
Because the CFOs handle it now.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with what going out and understanding how much value you provide and what the price elasticity is from the customer and what they're willing to pay. It's just set on, okay, we need to sell it at this price in order to hit our gross margin target or blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
It's a complete financial discussion as opposed to what the market will pull through. So companies end up either significantly overpricing their product or underpricing their product.
Yeah. It's also just interesting to me. So like one of my first jobs out of school, I was the database marketing coordinator at the Phoenix Suns. Very long title. Basically, I emailed people. And the thing that I was presented with in that B2C marketing job was an extensive persona, how much market share we had of entertainment in Phoenix and sports entertainment specifically, because we have a lot of major teams here that we're competing with. And I have never even seen something close in B2B marketing. So people always talk about this difference between what B2B marketers and B2C marketers are doing. And a lot of times I say B2C marketers are just doing fundamentals so much better. So much better.
All the best stuff that I do in marketing comes from B2C. Nobody took me seriously at the first company where I was like, we're going to sell this medical device that costs $10,000 to physicians through Facebook ads. People laughed at me. And then what happened 12 months later? We had done almost $1 million in revenue off of that channel alone. And so like, I don't know if it's being risk averse or traditional in the leadership sense, but like there's a lot to be, I think, learned and implemented from how B2C companies do marketing and branding that could be used in a B2B environment.
Totally.
So why aren't people doing it?
I think your point or hypothesis that it's risk aversion is a good one. I think people get really hung up on the idea that, I mean, especially you work with tech companies too, right? And like, just even the idea of the way that tech companies sell and market on the product and the features of that product is just so bad, you know? And it's just like, I don't really know why they do it, because it feels like all the conversations are always like, that doesn't work. But I think to your point, like, tech companies are so driven by the net new logo and just the things that, and I think it's so great. We did a webinar with John Miller recently, and he said, a lot of the problems with the way that B2B marketers communicate are totally my fault. Like, I sold this dream that you can bring a bunch of people in, create this demand funnel, nurture them down into a purchase process. Like, I created that beast, and like people have gone a little too crazy with it. And I think that that's sort of it, is people, when you go into, it's to the point where when you go into a leadership meeting and you say, we're going to do demand gen, bring people in and nurture them, pass them off to sales. Sales is going to get the deal. They go, okay, that all makes sense.
That sounds good.
Good.
Sounds super
Excellent.
Easy for us.
Let's do it. I think if you went and you wanted
actually
to
do it.
Yeah, I think if you went and tried to pitch something really different than that, like the thing that Burger King and McDonald's did, where Burger King literally told people to go to McDonald's for that day so that they could support children's cancer or whatever. I think if you went in and you said, hey, we're going to go to our largest competitor and create a social program where we push everyone to their website for a day, they'd be like, what?
Yeah.
Like, what is that? Why would we do that? You know?
Yeah.
And I just think like, and I also think we have to be fair too, that like B2C companies invest a ton of money
in marketing. It's almost the exact
areas.
Almost the exact reverse, right? So B2B companies, of their commercial budget, could be somewhere between 80+% of their commercial budget goes to sales. Either new logos, account management, things like that. Less, I see most companies somewhere in the 10 to 20% marketing range, and B2Cs is almost directly flipped.
Yeah. It's also just interesting. So another past job that I had was at a large telecommunications company. And these are just things that like I really didn't even realize they were so early in my career, I didn't realize they were unique to B2B.
Me too.
But I was in the acquisition department. We had a retention department, but I wasn't in that. I was an analyst for our acquisition department. And the idea of the number of people, human capital investment, budget investment in customers, retention, all of those things in B2B also suck, right? Like this idea of the first step, get your internal alignment. Secondly, talk to your customer. Like that is not something that a lot of people are doing. They're talking about how do we sell new logos?
Or
new leads,
let's set up a QBR just to make sure you're not going to churn, and then we'll try and pitch you like the enterprise version of our product at the end, and provide absolutely no value every quarter when you go and do that. That's literally what companies do. Or like, let's call them every 45 days and make sure they're using the product.
Yeah, and I think there's sort of what SaaS says they care about, and then there's where they put their money. And you can immediately tell what they actually care about by where they put their money. And so I always, part of what we try to do just in terms of even when we're suggesting technology to our customers is really look at companies that do invest in the customer, because technology is changing so quickly that features and benefits aren't even necessarily, it's like what everybody says. Cost isn't what people buy.
Are converging on one another. Product differentiation is getting lower and lower because you can iterate on the product so fast.
Yeah.
And so what wins after that?
I like
brand and communication.
Yeah. And I think in general, you can talk to people's existing customer base and get a feel for if they feel supported, if their objectives really feel important, or if somebody is just asking them for money, nickel and diming them, constantly talking about how their database is over in size, even though it's only by 112 people. Might have just happened to me. Might have just happened to me in a technology, maybe. I don't know.
I see a lot of companies because I look at the marketing attribution and also like the sales, what's going on from an inbound outbound perspective. And a lot of companies get a majority of their net new off of word of mouth and attribute it the wrong way.
Yeah, totally.
Like we went outbound to that company, and then 6 months later, they emailed back the account executive when we closed them in 3 days. It must have been outbound.
Yeah.
That's not what happened.
Yeah.
Or, we got 5 new deals this month through organic search, but we can't tell whether, because of the SSL lock, we can't tell whether it was branded or unbranded. But most of the time, it was branded search directly to the get a demo button, directly to buy.
Yeah.
And so I think people underestimate the impact of word of mouth, which is driven through customer success, and companies are basically pushing most of their money into acquisition, not making sure that their customers are having ultimate success, which then drives way more growth than your outbound team.
Yeah. My favorite cheat for if you really do need a quick win as a new leader, or you need just a quick win. Maybe that last campaign blew, and now you need a quick win. And I think the referral program, like that, just creating structure and making it easy for people to refer other people, even absent of an incentive, can be so powerful. Like just share your story with people in your network and making it easy for them. Like it always generates something.
And it works great if you don't need to ask.